the year I was born, my father was thrown into prison, and my mother wanted to take me away and remarry. The night before she planned to leave, my grandmother cooked a bowl of soup for her to drink. Poisonous mushroom soup. Waking up the next morning, fungal threads had grown from my mother's calves, rooting firmly into the earthen bed, making it impossible for her to ever get out of bed again. I am the very child my mother gave birth to while lying paralyzed on that bed. My grandmother had to do all the manual labor herself and couldn't afford to feed us. So she pasted a note right in front of my mother's room. As long as you pay, you can do whatever you want. People always start talking about Blackwater Hollow with the animals. They say the dogs were the first to sense it. One by one, they stopped barking after sundown. Then the birds disappeared from the power lines. Then the cattle in the neighboring fields were found standing motionless in the fog, their eyes white and glassy, as though listening to something rising from deep beneath the earth. But that was never where it began. It all began inside our house, long before the whole town understood. It was already dying. My name is Eli Mercer. When I was 16, everyone in Blackwater thought I was someone to pity. Skinny, quiet, too loyal to a sick mother, and too frightened of the world to stand on my own 2 feet. They were wrong. My mother, Mara, had not always been confined to bed. People in town liked to whisper that she had been weak for years, that illness had simply taken hold. But it wasn't sickness that broke her. Family did. After my father, Jonah Mercer, was sent to prison, my grandmother Lenora took control of the house. She smiled often, prayed loudly, kept a kitchen so spotless it smelled of bleach and dried herbs. To everyone else, she looked like the kind of woman who fed stray dogs and hummed hymns while she cooked. But behind locked doors, she fed my mother a dark broth. She claimed it would keep the family together. After that, my mother's legs began to change. The skin went pale and thin, then bruised, with spreading gray lines, like roots trapped beneath the flesh. Some nights she woke up crying, because she could feel something moving inside the bone. Lenora told everyone it was an infection. Told me it was my mother's own fault, that Mara had brought rot into the family, and we were all paying the price. When I was younger, I almost believed her. That was Lenora's gift. She never needed to shout when she could poison your thoughts instead. Then my father came home. Prison had not humbled him. It had sharpened him. He came back meaner, louder, and somehow more hollow, like a bucket that had rusted out everything that once made a person human. Within a week, he had brought another woman into the house, a widow from the edge of town, and behaved as though my mother had been dead and buried long ago. He didn't need his fists every time. There is a cruelty quieter than that. A locked door, plate kicked across the floor, a hand gripping your shoulder too hard, a look that tells you your suffering is merely an inconvenience to someone else. My mother kept apologizing for things she had never done. One night, I watched her try to drag herself across the kitchen floor. After he had screamed at her to get out of the way, her hands trembled so badly she could barely lift herself. The moonlight fell across her legs, and I glimpsed, just for a second, white threads running along her skin, like hairline cracks in porcelain. That was the night I stopped being a child. A month later, Lenora died. She called for me just before dawn, when the whole house smelled of camphor and wet earth. Her breathing rattled like dry seeds in a jar. She told me there was something hidden beneath the floorboards beside her bed. She said it had been waiting for the right bloodline, the right suffering, the right vessel. She called it the hollow mycelium. Then she told me what to do after she was gone. 3 candles, a triangle, the body at the center, and most importantly, she warned me never to let the ritual face the east. First light burns what doesn't belong in this world, she whispered. Her voice was frail, but her eyes were still sharp as a blade. Turn me away from the dawn, and I will go on protecting you, protecting me. Even then, she was still lying. So on the morning of her vigil, while the whole town pretended to mourn her, I lit the candles exactly as she had instructed. Except I turned the final point of the triangle toward the place where the sun would first rise. I stayed there until dawn. When the light broke across the floorboards, the candle nearest the window turned white. The room went so cold, my teeth ached. For one moment, I heard something breathing beneath the bed, then screamed, not with a human voice, not even with an animal's. It sounded like a tree splitting open in winter, a fracture from the very roots, stretching long, and then snapping silent, like a flame being smothered. Afterward, the smell in the room changed. No more perfume, no more church incense, only scorched dust, and something ancient collapsing in on itself. That was the end of Lenora. Beneath her bed, I found what she had hidden all those years. A knotted black growth, wrapped in burlap, damp and faintly warm, as though it still remembered the body it had wanted. I should have burned it. Instead, I brought it to my mother. She didn't ask where I had found it. She only looked at me for a long time, then down at her own ruined legs, and said, "If we do this, there's no going back." I know how that sounds. I know what people would call us, but people say those things from safe houses, with full stomachs, with doors that lock, with fathers who don't smile. When they see weakness, people confuse morality with distance. So we divided it between us. We boiled the thing down until the kitchen filled with an earthy bitterness that clung to the curtains for days. We drank in silence, not looking at each other, not saying a word. That night, my mother did not sleep. Neither did I. By morning, the pain had changed. Not gone, changed. The white filaments in her legs began pulling back beneath the skin, as though something was reconsidering its shape. She could move her toes for the first time in years. I remember her looking at me with reddened eyes. I remember not knowing whether to cry or simply breathe. We should have left then. That had been the plan. Recover quietly, save what little money we had, disappear before my father noticed. Strength returning to the woman he had buried alive in his mind. But cruelty has a way of pressing too hard. When he struck her again, hard enough that she slid from the edge of the bed, I understood. If we stayed passive, he would finish what Lenora had started. So my mother died. At least, that is what Blackwater Hollow believed. They found her by the reservoir at dawn, floating half-submerged in the reeds, her body swollen by water and wrapped in lake weeds. No one looked too closely. No one ever does. When grief would require responsibility, the sheriff signed the papers. The church refused a proper service. They buried her beyond the old cemetery fence because Jonah said he wouldn't waste money on a woman already halfway in the grave. That was the first kindness the town had ever shown us, because a dead woman is the perfect disguise. While Blackwater mourned itself, my mother waited beneath the earth, hidden in an abandoned burial vault, where the soil stayed cold and the roots ran deep. The hollow mycelium fed slowly there, drawing from decay, from damp stone, from everything the town had discarded and forgotten, and I worked above ground. The first mushrooms appeared in kitchens, basements, crawl spaces, small, pale growths, no bigger than a child's fist. People called them mold, then blight, then infestation. By the time they started tearing up floorboards to cut them out, it was already too late. The roots were under the walls, under the roads, under every house. I called them pale caps. They pulsed when no one was looking. They spread where cruelty had lived the longest. Soon the town began to fade, faces hollowed, voices thinned. People slept 12 hours and woke exhausted. Livestock stopped breeding. Gardens blackened. Blackwater Hollow began to look like a photograph left too long in the sun. All its colors bleached away, its edges blurring. Nothing left but pale and fading shapes. That was when the outsiders came. The first was Sister Vale, a traveling spiritual healer. Silver crosses, snake oil charm, and eyes too hungry to belong to any saint. She told the town she could cleanse the land. She planted boundary posts around the cemetery and spoke in old words no church would claim. The second was Reverend Crow, a gaunt revival preacher who arrived 3 days later and declared her a fraud. They were both right, and neither of them had come to save Blackwater. They had come because they recognized what was growing beneath it. Both understood that whatever was feeding under those graves could be bound, redirected, perhaps even worn, like a second life. I saw it the moment each of them looked at my mother's empty grave and tried to hide their disappointment. So I gave them a reason to hate each other. I moved what traces remained, changed the signs, left one set of footprints where the other would find them. Let each hear just enough truth to sharpen their suspicion. By the next storm, they were accusing each other in the cemetery, while the whole town hid indoors listening to thunder roll over dead fields. I watched from the tree line as they tore into one another with prayers they did not believe, and rituals neither of them deserved. Lightning struck somewhere behind the chapel. The boundary posts caught fire. The wind howled through the graveyard like something laughing underground. By dawn, neither of them was standing. After that, Blackwater Hollow unraveled quickly. Jonah was among the last to understand. By then he looked 20 years older. His hands shook. His voice cracked on every other word. He still blamed everyone else. Men like him always do. He staggered to the cemetery with a shovel, convinced he could dig the truth out of the ground if he only went deep enough. He found only emptiness, and that was the first time I told him the truth. Not all of it, just enough. I told him my mother had never belonged to him, that Lenora had poisoned the house long before he went away, that some things buried alive don't die, they wait. He tried to lunge at me. He fell before he got close. When the first light touched the cemetery, the white network beneath the soil tightened. He heard it then, the thing Blackwater had been ignoring for weeks. The sound of roots, drinking. I left him there and walked away. By the time the harvest moon rose over the town, the streets were silent. No church bells, no engines, no dogs, only the wind moving through empty porches and the soft, clicking sound of pale caps opening in the dark. I went to the burial vault with a lantern and a shovel. The stone door was half covered now, webbed over with white filaments that recoiled from the flame. Inside, my mother lay awake in the darkness, not dead, not unchanged, but breathing, stronger, her face no longer gray with pain, her legs trembling as she stood for the first time. She cried when she took 3 steps. I cried too. Outside, the whole town looked washed in silver. Abandoned houses, dead gardens, the remains of a life that had fed on us, until something deeper fed back. Tonight should have been a family night, she said softly, gazing up at the great moon over Blackwater. I knelt so she could climb onto my back. Then I carried her toward the road out of town. For the first time in years, she did not feel fragile. I remember the smell of wet leaves, the cold, the moonlight on the cracked road. I remember not looking back. And when she asked me where we would go, I gave her the only truth that had ever mattered. As long as we leave together, I said, that's home.